Hi, it's Randy Herman, Associate Broker with Keller Williams Realty, bringing you Everything Real Estate, the program that answers all your questions about real estate and how to do a real estate transaction. We've been going over how to put together your real estate team, talking to appraiser, inspector, real estate attorney, etc. But today we have a very special guest, my friend Jay Rogers. Jay, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And you are the odd man out of my list, mainly because you are an artist who's inspired and makes boxes from real estate, right?
Yes, I guess you'd have to say that. It's architecture is my thing right now. Yeah.
Well, how did you, first of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a woodworker living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I've been making boxes for 40 years now, probably. And in the last 5 years or so, I've really turned to one-of-a-kind pieces that are based on architecture and a sort of angle of architecture I call fantasy architecture. Architecture that is not necessarily practical or based on any utilitarian need. It's really architecture that is meant to take the mind on a journey.
Right. So real estate and architecture can be used for all kinds of inspiration, and all kinds of inspiration can be used to influence architecture, obviously. So my question to you is, how come you decided to focus now on using architecture as a inspiration?
It had always been an interest of mine, architecture. My father was an architect. And I've always looked at buildings, but I never sort of connected them with boxes. I was doing a different type of box. But I knew that sooner or later it was somewhere I was going to go. And I started with the buildings of Frank Lloyd Wright, because they're very box-like.
Right.
And that got me started, and then I began to use some of the houses of people I knew to build boxes.
Right.
And then it went on from there.
Right. So it started out with abstract shapes, right? That then turned in focus more on real estate. On
yes. It took me a good 30 years of
Right.
abstract shapes before I was ready to tackle a house or a simple piece of architecture.
So I know that you've had commissions, and you do commissions. I saw one you did for the Gore House, which I actually just visited about a month ago.
Oh, it's a neat place.
Really neat
Gore
place.
Place in Waltham.
Yep.
Beautiful 18th century mansion.
Right.
And they commissioned me to do a model that would be would make the mansion more accessible for blind people.
Oh, for blind people. Great.
So it was meant to be tactile, and they chose me because I'm used to making things that you can take apart and feel and touch. So
you have done these private commissions, such as this farm that came apart, and I mean, do people ask you to do it for gifts or for?
Yeah, usually there's a big fancy anniversary or something coming up, and they say, can you make a model of the house? And I say, well, I won't make a model, but I'll make you a box.
Right. So that brings up a good point. So what's the difference between what you're doing in terms of an architectural model like this one, or a dollhouse, let's say, that some model makers will make, and what you're doing?
First of all, I'm not trying to make an exact replica of anything. It's important to me that you don't get too literal with what I'm making, and that what I'm making suggests something. I try and figure out what are the most important elements and simplify it down. And then for me, the real interest is, how am I going to make it open? How am I going to make this thing suddenly have a certain number of inner compartments, maybe a symbolic number of inner compartments, and how am I going to draw the person into it and not have it just be something that looks like the house, but once you've seen it for about 5 seconds, you've lost interest.
Right. I've always been amazed by your work, how you can have so many intricate pieces and compartments and figure it out like a Chinese puzzle.
Yeah. That's what got me started, puzzle boxes.
Oh, really?
Yes. My very first puzzle box, actually, I think went to you.
Oh, my gosh. That was a while ago.
A long time ago, yeah.
Yeah. And what is so important to you about boxes?
I think...
I mean, why not just make a model?
Yeah. Definitely... to me, it has to be a box. I think that well, I'm fascinated, and I think all people are fascinated by containers. We like the fact that something has an inside and that it might contain something. And I think we feel a resonance. We feel a certain connection because we know that we're containers. We have an inside that nobody can see. And the real fascination is, how do you get inside? You know, a box or a human being. How do you find out what's going on?
Right. So do you plan these things out all in the beginning, or what do you do? Do you work from the outside? I mean, this one, for example, and the ones that I saw first that you were dealing with fantasy were inspired by the Dutch artist Max Escher, right?
Yes. I do start with most of my boxes. I start with a drawing. If it's something that I can really sort of think out, I make fairly detailed drawings that are floor plans and elevations. With the Escher,
was it the perspective that got you, or the weird dimensionality of it?
Escher, what drew me into Escher, first of all, his staircases. You know, who can resist a staircase? You know, but also, he has a way of constantly changing your perspective. So you think you're looking at the architecture this way, and then suddenly you realize that you should be looking at it another way. So that's what I tried to capture. I'll give an example with this box.
Yeah, please.
I thought, if you start with this is sort of the facade, this is the image, but what if I try and repeat that over here? It's the same facade, but it's in a different orientation than the first one. If I rotate the box again, I have the same facade here. So I have it 3 different times in 3 different orientations. That's very Escher. He always likes to
Yeah, it's like you
change
climb
roles.
these staircases into nothing, but you keep coming back.
If you climb a staircase this way, you have to change your sense of what's up to climb up to here, and then you have to keep changing it. So it keeps moving and moving. And then I had to figure out, well, okay, it's a box. What do I do?
It's funny though, when you see it in an Escher print or a painting, it makes sense, but to try to see it in 3 dimensions, how did you do that?
Well, I nearly went crazy was what happened, you know, and I slept a lot because my mind would just get tired out thinking of this, because as soon as you start to sort of hollow away one facade, you're actually hollowing away 2 others, so they're meeting at some unknown point.
Right. Could you take this apart for us and
I
show
will
us
do
the
that.
different compartments?
So the back side also is 3 identical facades, if you will. But one of them, which one? Aha, that one comes off. I have to take this little piece off. Then I can go like this,
Oh, so cool.
and inside is a cube.
This is a cube, right?
And the neat thing is, if I put this back on, you can look at this architecture and see right through it.
Oh, that is cool.
So
That is really cool.
this took a while.
Right. And what do people put in these boxes?
You know, I leave that up to them.
Their last will? Their
Hopefully something they don't want to get at too quickly. No, you know, when I ask people who bought boxes, you know, do you use the thing? I'd say about half of them say, oh yeah, I keep this very special thing. And the others say, nope, I just like to look at it.
Yeah.
So that's fine with me, whatever works.
And who do you sell these to? I mean, aside from, and how do you sell them?
I used to sell them at craft shows around the country, and in the last 5 years, I've stepped back from that so that I could really develop a body of work of these one-of-a-kind pieces. So now my focus is more on galleries.
Right. So how long does it take you to do something like this?
Several months, I'd
Really?
say. Yeah.
Wow.
You know, from the initial conception to drawing it out to making it and then making a million mistakes and having to rip it apart and then put it back together and then finally put all the finish on, etc.
Wow. So you produce 6 a year?
Well, I'm doing other things as well, so maybe I only, maybe four a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive. So part of what always impresses me about you as an artist is that you go from one idea or one imagery to another. So like you're saying, what attracted you was a staircase, and then I know you did a whole series on staircases.
Yeah, I thought, stairs do many different things. Why just content myself with one set of stairs? So I did a series of 8 boxes and then another series of 4 on different stair configurations. They make for beautiful abstract shapes.
Yeah.
And you're fooling with negative space as well as positive space and all that sort of stuff. So
Yeah, it makes me wish I was a Lilliputian, being able to walk up those stairs.
right,
It's amazing.
probably as you just keep going around and around.
So, bringing up size, why do you decide to make a box this size and not 4 feet or 6 feet tall?
Yeah, I think about that a lot because really there's the scale of the hand, there's the scale of the face, what you look at, and then there's the scale of your body. And I want something that will work always with the hands, that you'll be able to manage it with your hands, that it's not so big that you sort of back away from it, or not too small that you have to get down and really peer into it. But I want it to have a certain relationship with your hand because I think that actually draws you in.
But it's funny,
more.
real estate is usually thought of as environmental. You're walking into something, it's defining the space where you live or whatever. I mean, we do see buildings from afar, but you're saying that you want to have everything controlled within your vision.
I want to have the hand be able to understand it first, but I do want it to be drawn in. I want you to feel the interior of it. For instance, the Piranesi box, which I'll show in a minute, is really about going inside and feeling what the space is like.
Right, well, we'd love to see that
Great.
one, actually. So Piranesi was an artist, right? He lived in Rome, I believe, right?
Yes, he did, and he made his living making engravings of Roman ruins. And then at one point, he sort of, from all accounts, had a little bit of a psychotic break. And when he came back, he started doing these etchings of imaginary prison interiors. Turns out,
Oh yeah, I heard he like had malaria or he had some fever and was hallucinating.
yes, maybe it was that. And apparently prisons were a common theme in operas at the time. There would be a set, and a lot of prisons were in Roman ruins. And so he started to do these etchings of these fantastic constructions. And those really interested me. Interestingly, they also interested M.C. Escher. He was one of the main inspirations for Escher. So this one is based on one of his etchings of a prison interior. And I really did want to get it so that you were drawn into the space. And you could see this catwalk back here for the inspectors and all the different cells and entrances here. And there's actually a grill here the light will shine down in, so it's sort of subterranean.
Oh my gosh.
And then,
It really is like a little stage set.
yes, yeah, you can imagine some tiny little actor just acting his heart out there. So there's a drawer there. Let's see, what else? Under each of these places is a drawer. Let's see, these are all. And then from my old puzzle box days, there's actually a secret compartment. If I push on this side, there's a compartment that comes out in here.
Oh, really cool. Maybe we could turn it around and show people from the other side.
Yeah. And the back is,
Show that secret compartment. Now that your secret's out here.
uh-oh, I'm gonna have to change this. So you push on that, and then you can see on this side that the box comes there.
Oh, cool. Really cool.
So, and that's one of a series of 3 boxes I did based on the etchings of Piranesi, and I may do some more. They're pretty fantastic.
Yeah, and I can see that you're getting into all kinds of arches and interior space here. And
Exactly.
Yeah, it is. It just totally draws you in.
Start to have a little box clutter here. There we go.
Yep, good. So, in terms of the space, do you imagine yourself in the space? How do you picture that space? How do you visualize it? Is my
I do picture myself in the space. Whenever I go into any space, I'm a very spatial person. I really react to the feeling of a building and how things move through it, where the light is, all that sort of stuff. So when I'm thinking about what I'm going to make, I do imagine not just what it's going to look like from the outside, but what it's going to feel like, because I know that we do that as human beings. We are able to imagine ourselves in totally different places.
Walking in.
So I think, well, what would it be like there? Is that too big? Is that too small? Should I make it go over here?
You know, it's funny, having done sculpture for a number of years myself, I found that after a while I could actually feel space. You know,
Yes.
sculpture wasn't just existence, that this is as an object, but that you can actually feel how the space is being used.
Yep, I think it's something you can learn and develop. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. So again, what I had said was I love your way of going on and projecting a theme. And what I admired when you were starting to do these was that it then led to something that was even more abstract, this heaven and hell concept.
Yeah, I started with, you know, specific artwork or artists to sort of get my inspiration going, but eventually I started making my own designs. I was very interested in medieval reliquaries, where they used to hide those bones of saints, and they always looked like little cathedrals, little buildings, and I thought, I want to make one of those. So,
you know, my favorite is St. Petronius's tongue, which is in Verona.
They still have it.
Well, it's supposed to wag if you lie in front of it.
Oh, well, I'll look forward to seeing that.
So one of your boxes is going to hold someone's finger or something?
Well, it turns out you know, the heaven and hell doesn't hold that large a bone or organ, but I wanted to work with that idea of making a little medieval, sort of a little medieval building, and then I ended up thinking, well, it really needs something underneath it, and that's where hell came in.
But yeah, I love the way you use the light in the dark woods. Where do you get your wood from?
They're all veneers, and I get them from a veneer supplier in upstate New York called Certainly Wood. The reason why I use veneers rather than solid wood is, number one, it's much more stable, because I put it on a plywood substrate.
I mean, it doesn't crack.
So it doesn't crack, it doesn't curl or move. It's very, very stable. So for these small things, and with things opening and closing, you need to have that stability.
So you're telling me every surface is veneered?
Every surface is veneered, except for the stairs.
It's like you got to make it twice or three times.
And then I have to edge it, you know, with veneer as well. But veneer also allows me to do, as for instance with the Escher box over there, I can use a light wood on one side and a dark wood on the other side, something that doesn't exist in nature.
Right.
And so I can play with light. I can direct the eye here or there.
Cool, really cool. So let's go on to the next one. I know some of your other inspiration has been pyramids and ziggurats, and what about them has attracted you?
It's again that idea of fantasy architecture. Here are these amazing temples, and nobody really knows quite what they were for or how they were used. They have a few rooms, but they're really about just scaring the hell out of people, or you know, or impressing them or something. You know, it's psychological architecture. It's not mundane utilitarian architecture,
Right.
and that always fascinates me.
Right, and those hidden compartments and finding your Tutankhamun somewhere.
Right, exactly. It's got to be hidden in there
Yeah,
somewhere.
but again, what I loved was the fact that you went from, you know, these more traditional, let's say, images of architecture to your own interpretation of the Tower of Babel. And I think you brought it
Good. Yep. Let me
today.
show you
man.
that guy.
All right. This, I think, is incredible. Just for its complexity, its imagery, and the way that you took such a complicated concept and simplified it down, and yet it still looks incredibly complex.
In fact, that's part of the process. When I start drawing, it's always way too complicated, and then I think, this is going to take me 10 years to make this thing. So I have to simplify it down. Then I find certain patterns. I go, okay, it begins to take shape. So for instance, this is really an octagon. It's somewhat inspired by the painting by Peter Bruegel,
Right.
who had this sort of, what I loved from his painting was this inner tower that's darker, and there's an outer tower being built around it, and then they all stop. This particular box was a challenge for me because I didn't know when it was going to be finished. It had to be unfinished, like the Tower of Babel. So I knew what I was doing down here, but I didn't know what was going to happen up here. And then I thought, oh, it's simple, just make an octagon with that sort of is a spiral. And it turns out that spirals don't work that way. That as they go up, one side gets shorter and another side gets longer. So it got very tricky.
Yeah, I would say.
But I'll show you what happens here.
Yeah, please.
The top comes off like that.
All right, so.
It's got a little bit of building debris still rattling around in it.
And what attracted to you about the story of Babel?
Again, fantasy architecture, just that idea. How could there ever have been such a tower that almost went up to heaven? And you know, where is it now? You know, it's just, I think the mind just, you know, it's fertile ground for all sorts of things.
Oh, yeah.
And here I wanted to use this blue over and over again because I was sort of referencing the gates of Persepolis with those beautiful bowls, those blue tile gates.
Those enameled gates?
Exactly.
Right, so that's a compartment there?
So that's a compartment.
Could I see the inside? Right, so that's the compartment, cool, which is covered by the darker portion.
Right, and then there's another compartment there. I'm going to have quite a time putting this back together because they only fit one way.
Do they come with instructions? Or?
Well, no, I have an 800 number. No, just kidding. And then this has the...
oh, look at the colonnade.
Yeah, this is a big hall, if you will.
So
this
cool.
is the first time I decided to really finish off the inside of the box and have it be something that you just see what I mean? How it got, there we go.
So all of these pieces are handmade?
Totally. I mean, I have a table saw, a little tiny table saw with a 3-inch blade. That's what I do almost everything on. And then a little bit of handwork, and where do you go? Voila.
And you can do that in a couple months. Unbelievable. Really. That's very impressive.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, where am I going to put this guy now?
Why don't you put him on the ground if you don't mind? And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the mazes. And, you know, I used to love the old Spanish desks where you'd have to do 2 or 3 different actions in order to open up one drawer and change things. And I remember you used to make boxes like that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. There's a long tradition of woodworking that has secret compartments because people didn't used to have locks necessarily and keys that easily. It was, you know, it was everybody needed to hide their doubloons and this and that. So it's a very long tradition of marquetry and also of architectural marquetry. A lot of those wonderful old Renaissance desks have these beautiful little.
So it had a practical purpose, and at the same time, it was this gorgeous, ornate thing.
And that obviously it appeals to me too. I like that these can be practical.
Right. And then you went into fantasy cities. I know you did something about Dr. Caligari's chambers.
Yes, the film Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, I think it was shown when we were in school. I think we might both have gone and seen it, but it impressed me immediately.
We went to school during the time of silent film. Yes.
Well, no, but you know, because it's such a famous film, and the sets in it are legendary because there's not a single right angle in the set because it's actually expressing the craziness of the narrator. So that got me going. That was actually the hardest box I've ever made because I couldn't plan it out because everything was at an angle. It had to grow
piece by piece.
Organically.
Wow,
and,
incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Well,
I hated that.
I don't want to run out of time here because I definitely want to go into these because I thought this is one of the most interesting series you have, right? These internal spaces. Maybe you could hold that up a little bit.
Yeah, these are these structures which I discovered by accident, really. These structures in India called stepwells, where instead of the architecture going up above ground and you seeing all these turrets and stairways and things, they dug down into the earth and often with stairways trying to get down to where the water was in this very dry climate. So this particular one is based on an actual stepwell in Rajasthan
India, right?
In India.
Right.
And what I loved about it was all the others are actual structures with stairs and
Yeah,
everything.
could you hold that up a little more?
This one, they actually took the side of the hillsides in this ravine, terraced it off, actually covered everything with stone, made these beautiful but totally irregular terraces, and then enclosed it, built a dam so that they could keep the water in. And then the water came down through this very odd sluice way, and this, I think, is a way for people to come down and get the water, depending on how high the water is. Sometimes the water would be up to here, or it might be all the way down there.
I just imagine an alien coming down and seeing this box and wondering, what do people use this for? You know?
Well, I'd like to know that too.
You want to show us how that
So yeah,
gets put together?
so in the dam here, there's a little
Compartment there.
compartment there,
Cool.
and then on the back side here, this whole thing comes out,
You see that?
and that will lift
Oh
off.
my gosh. Wow.
Just
So it's a
like
box
this.
inside a box inside a box.
And then, of course, I hate to waste space, and there are two little areas over here that have some.
Hidden compartments.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Oh, this is so cool, and I love that internal space. It really does, like you're saying, draw you in constantly.
and the fact that this actually exists somewhere. I mean,
Yeah.
I've simplified it as I do all the things.
So you've made a whole series of these.
I've made 4 of these so far, and there's so many of them. I'll probably make another, yeah.
Right. So what are you working on now?
I just finished a box based on Italian architecture. I was in Tuscany years ago and went to a lot of those wonderful hill towns and was so impressed by the way things are jumbled all together, and there'll be this sudden beautiful facade right next to a whole bunch of other buildings with little crenellations, and I wanted to make something that was a hodgepodge.
So people can now come and see your stuff. You're having a show, right?
Yes, this I just finished in time for the show that I'm going to be doing at the Society of Arts and Crafts in Boston.
Right.
And the opening is in a week on the 26th
Okay.
of October. They've got a great new location down by the seaport. They're a great organization, very established, been around for a long while, championing crafts.
Right.
And they've given me a one-man show, which I'm just delighted about.
That's terrific. So that's next week.
That is next week, and it'll be running for 2 months.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry we didn't have time to go into the quarries and into the painting. It's so interesting the way that you interpret all of these things and what gives you inspiration. But if people have questions and want to talk to you or find out more about your boxes, how can they contact you?
Well, I have my website, which is jrogerssculptureboxes.com. And that's the only social media I do, if you'd call it that.
Right.
That's
And
the
it's
way to be in
and
touch with me.
It's a great website.
Thank
too.
you.
Yeah. So I can't thank you enough, Jay. It's
Thank
been
you for having
terrific.
me. This has been great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic artistry.
And look forward to seeing you at the show.
I'll be there.
Great. All right. Wow, did we just...